That's right. Human bean juice.
At the time of its release, this 5-minute piece of test footage was the closest anyone was gonna get to a Watchmen film. Created by writer David Hayter, this low-budget proof of concept was meant to prove that Watchmen was indeed adaptable to Universal Studios. With Alan Moore giving his seal of approval, it seemed like we'd finally get to see the seminal story brought to life. However, due to multiple circumstances, Hayter and director Paul Greengrass would drop out of the project, giving Zack Snyder the opportunity to create his dark take on the material. Hayter's original approach to Watchmen was much different from what we ended up getting. So let's take a look at the test footage and the many pieces of concept art to see how this unmade Watchmen film compared to Zack Snyder's adaptation. Before we start, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and like the video. Anyways, let's get started. Zack Snyder's Watchmen closely follows the original source material. It adapts the same time period, themes, and uses the exact same dialogue. It even recreates many iconic shots from the comic, with Zack Snyder's use of camera work to enhance every sequence. While the movie is relatively faithful, it still manages to take some creative liberties with the story. First of all, Zack Snyder takes the intentionally ridiculous costume designs and attempts to make them look more modern and cool looking. Snyder also takes the vibrant and saturated artwork and opts to go for a much more dark, gritty, and moody aesthetic, which really adds to the film's oppressive atmosphere. In the original Watchmen story, the heroes are shown to be devoid of any superhuman abilities. However, Snyder decides to give his version of Watchmen super strength and agility. Snyder's Watchmen is not a one-to-one recreation of the comic, choosing to add many new elements that sets it apart from the original story. Hayter and Greengrass's version of Watchmen is also no different, but instead of making a literal translation, they opted to use Watchmen as a template to formulate a brand new story set in a grounded and realistic world. Instead of making the film a period piece, Hayter's Watchmen is set in a 2003 New York in a post 9/11 America. Instead of communists being the main looming threat, Western Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern terrorists would serve as the new antagonistic forces threatening to plunge the world into destruction. If the original Watchmen captured the mistrust and anxiety within a Cold War era America, then Hayter's Watchmen served as a way of showcasing American paranoia surrounding national security, foreign intervention, and heightened surveillance. Hayter and Greengrass's Watchmen was very much a reflection of our reality. In fact, the creators wanted the world to look and feel real, almost like a documentary for how the world would be presented and shot. This means that there would be no overly stylized visuals like in Snyder's version, but something that looks much more natural. In Hayter's mind, the Watchmen story is a reflection of the times, so when done right, the story can remain relevant while still staying true to the spirit of the graphic novel. Dr. Manhattan's design isn't very complicated to adapt. His design consists of a blue man with white eyes and black eyeshadow. Zack Snyder's depiction of the character is mostly faithful to his comic appearance. However, one tiny detail Zack Snyder includes is the astral glow that emits from his body, a feature that was inspired by Chernikov radiation from underwater reactors. Hayter and Greengrass's version take more creative liberties with the look. In these concepts, Dr. Manhattan's body doesn't seem to be fully reconstructed. You can see how his musculature is semi-exposed, especially around the neck area. He's also missing a huge chunk of his abdominal cavity, making him appear like some kind of undead zombie. This concept is much tamer, but you can still notice many interesting design additions to Dr. Manhattan's body. It seems like the artists were trying to make Dr. Manhattan appear more unique, like something that appeared even less human and detached from reality. Other concepts embrace the character's original design, as he's devoid of any drastic alterations to his body. In this concept, the blue on Dr. Manhattan's body doesn't appear solid. It looks like a liquid that moves around, similar to a lava lamp. The astral glow of his body is also present, allowing for this design to be unique, while still managing to stay faithful to his comic appearance. Rorschach in Watchmen is portrayed as a mentally unstable, violent, and far-right vigilante who embraces a narrow black and white worldview. This moral absolutism has alienated him from society, and this is perfectly reflected in his speech and attire. The character dons old and messy clothing that others have described as having a horrid smell. His voice is described as sounding horribly monotone and lacking any form of emotion.
That's right. Human being juice.
The character also has a messy and incomplete speech pattern, as he omits certain words entirely from his sentences.
This city is dying of rabies. Is the best I can do to wipe random flecks of foam from its lips.
Ray Stevenson portrays Rorschach in The Camera Test. Aesthetic-wise, he stays faithful to the character's look, albeit he appears a lot more neat and tidy. In the actual film, Rorschach's appearance would have been unlike what we see in the comics. He mostly dons a large brown jacket, which serves as a way of making him appear physically imposing. He's also devoid of his fedora and his white scarf. If Rorschach is meant to be a subversion of 80s detective characters like The Question, then this version is meant to be a more contemporary street-level detective, an urban rendition of the character. One of the most notable differences with this version of the character and the comic is his voice. While the comic version has a messy and monotone speech pattern, this one sounds...
Hello, Daniel. I helped myself to some beans.
Completely normal. He actually comes across as friendly, well-spoken, and charismatic, and he never seems to omit words from his sentences. Due to this, it makes me believe that he lacks the mental instability that makes the character so compelling. That was until this scene.
Is that what they're saying about me now? That I'm paranoid?
This small detail indicates that Rorschach's persona is only an act, meant to hide away his paranoid and broken psyche. Although this version seems a lot more approachable, this small character trait would make anyone uncomfortable to be around him. Jackie Earle Haley portrays Rorschach in Zack Snyder's Watchmen, and this version is noticeably more faithful to Alan Moore's depiction. For one thing, they really make it clear how disgusting this version is. His clothes appear old, unkempt, and dirty. Upon his first appearance, we see cans of spilled beans littered across the table.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Dog carcass in alley this morning.
Zack Snyder loved Alan Moore's Rorschach voice and instructed Haley to come up with something similar. As a result, Haley takes the voice and makes slight alterations, such as exaggerating the growl.
This city's afraid of me. I've seen its true face.
Zack Snyder even gives Rorschach his broken speech pattern and his emotionless demeanor that lacks motivation and expression.
Minor wound. Won't need hospitalization.
In terms of his personality, Zack Snyder's Rorschach is relatively faithful to the comic. He maintains his black and white worldview and moral absolutism. However, unlike the comic, Rorschach's mental instability is downplayed and isn't really fully showcased. but Zack Snyder does seem to amplify the character's violence to a whole new level. In the Watchmen test footage, Nite Owl is played by actor Ian Glenn, who portrays a much more accurate depiction of the character.
So, long time no see. How have you been keeping?
Out of prison, so far.
When Nite Owl first appears in the Watchmen comic, he's shown to be polite and friendly. However, he's also quite insecure, awkward, and lacks confidence in himself. He's also visibly uncomfortable with Rorschach's presence, which results in his nervous demeanor.
First you heard about it.
Well, I haven't kept in touch with anyone since I retired.
Ian Glenn perfectly brings this character's nervous, polite, and awkward personality to the screen. In his first introduction, he seems visibly unnerved by Rorschach's presence.
No, of course not. Want me to heat some up for you?
His speech is awkward and anxious, and his body language gives off the vibe of someone who is uptight and lacks confidence. Although he's visibly nervous, he still attempts to be polite and well-mannered to hide away his insecurities. Patrick Wilson portrays the character in Zack Snyder's version of Watchmen, and this portrayal is much different from the comic and Hayter's adaptation. Wilson's Nite Owl comes across as much more confident and composed. His speech isn't as nervous sounding as the others. Instead, it's fluid and well thought out. He never seems nervous around Rorschach, and even attempts to engage in small talk.
Heard about you on the news. Say you attacked a cop.
Zack Snyder crafted a version of the character who truly fits within the traditional superhero mold. Muscular, badass, smart, good-looking, and confident. He's basically an idealized depiction of the original character. Although he has many character traits that keeps him faithful to his comic iteration, Zack Snyder still takes many creative liberties to craft his preferred envisioning of the character. In the comics, Ozymandias represents the peak of human perfection on both appearance, intelligence, and physical capabilities. With blonde hair, blue eyes, a lean build, and neatly worn attire, it's no wonder that the character is described as a divine figure by others. This godlike presence is perfectly reflected in his superhero costume, taking inspiration from both Ramses II and Alexander the Great. Ozymandias appears like he's a divine ruler with unmatched intelligence. The artists for the unmade Watchmen film took the Egyptian influences of the character design and heightened it to a large degree. The character still maintains the gold accessories, but he seems to be wearing a strange full-body piece of armor that's modeled after a muscular man. The armor even comes with a mask that reveals his bottom jaw area. This suit is a very interesting reimagining and makes him appear like a Roman statue. Zack Snyder also drastically changes the design, but this time, the suit was made to appear like a muscle suit. Zack Snyder wanted to parody the nipple suit from Schumacher's Batman films, so as a result, we are left with a character who acts as a living parody of campy and cheesy supervillains. Both versions of Watchmen are faithful in their own ways. While Zack Snyder opted to make a one-to-one adaptation while inserting his own creative vision, Hayter and Greengrass changed both the setting and time period while still attempting to stay faithful. But unfortunately, this need to place their contemporary stamp on the source material is likely why the film was never made.